Okay, we're back. This is game number, I'm gonna say, four of the Delial vs. Turdz match. Our rules are we have all rules in effect, various decks, no elemental, obviously, level 9. Many moons ago, maybe 15, 14-ish years now, I put a level ranking on the TTA forums, and I believe I had level 9, ninth, maybe 8th. Not a level I liked. Still not a level I love. Um, Probably less negative about it nowadays. It's there's so many level pairs. I'm gonna get so distracted this game. Apologies already. I was all excited to be like, I did a good job commentating a closed game. I can do it again. And now we get an open game where like I have to turn my brain on in a different way, and I'm just not ready for that. So we're gonna slowly ease into it with consideration of I've lost my train of thought. Great work, great start. Oh yeah, level 9. And kind of level pairs, right? Level 10 is the smooth level, the level where things kind of do tend to work out for combo potential. And then level 9 just throws in so many more like ones, twos, and threes, and just these enormous gaps that are much less likely to be comboed. And right, the cards just aren't going to come together as cleanly. You have, A7-7-1s instead of A7-7-4s. A7-7-4s are beautiful at hitting sevens, at hitting A's. A7-7-1s, the ones just, it's not part of the card. It's not a cohesive part. You have these very cohesive cards. And even if you think of stuff with like four different numbers, like say A9-6-4s, an A9-6-4 has kind of the potential to fight anything. Um, like obviously, it can't take A's without help, but it has some same potential. Nines, it can same wall. Eights, it can plus wall with the 6-4. Sevens, it can plus wall with the 9-6. Sixes, it can same wall or plus wall with the A6. Fives, it can hit with the 9-4. Fours, it can hit with the 4A. And anything 3 or lower, A is rarer on level 10, but B, all four cards numbers on the card can take. So an A9-6-4, in one sense, can face any number and has potential to line up well against it, which makes them a fun type of card to use and a very popular pairing. And level 9, you really don't see stuff like that, right? If you pick a card here like A6-3-6, you know, it can overpower a 9, but it doesn't have really combo potential. It can overpower an 8 one way, but it doesn't really have combo potential. Yeah, it can hit sevens and sixes, but that's it, right? Fours, fives, eights, nines. It's just not a very interesting card to play against. Anything 3 or down, it has good potential against, but most cards do. So there's this way that level 10 is a really clean level, and level 9 isn't. And some people prefer the more unbalanced levels like level 9, and most people, which doesn't mean we're right, but most people prefer the cleaner levels like level 10. And I think it's obviously completely fine to have a preference either way, but I tend to think this holds up on other levels. For instance, 9 and 10 are the two levels where A is the maximum number on a non rare card. And they make a natural pair, and what we'll usually see is the higher of the two of the levels tends to be the cleaner one. So like level 6 and 7 is another standard pair. I remember Akiyama said in his interview he didn't like level 7 because it's too clean. The cards work out too well. And level 6 is the version that has similar number stuff, but tends not to work out very cleanly. There's going to be more overpowering, less comboing, and more having to figure out where to get any combos rather than kind of always having some potential. Another example is levels 3, 4, and 5, but especially 4 and 5 because level 3 doesn't have that many 7s, and levels 4 and 5 tend to have a lot. Alright, Turdz goes for the one he can take back. Something really important here is whenever you have recaptures, you want to check that you can recapture the recaptures. So kind of the first thing I think is, okay, A771 is the recapturer in 6, but that immediately gives me discomfort, right? Because I immediately know that has a high number taking out. But Turdz has 6A64, so it's not that big a problem. And he also has 9-4A3 for 8, so he has very good lock-ins. One thing I was actually thinking about was Turdz tends to play more corner starters enclosed than than I certainly do. But how much, if you saw him play this corner starter enclosed, would you you definitely expect him to have a plus wall in 6. Do you expect him to have a same wall in 8? And I kind of think I would on this starter, though it's easy to say now seeing the cards. But I was thinking earlier before, if we get closed and we see a starter like this, what are we going to predict? Because I was going to try to be making predictions about other cards in the hand, not like the exact card, but that they can do specific things. And this was something I thought I will predict this if it comes up. And now you won't believe me because it looks too obvious and it's open and all that, which is fair. Okay. So on the level pairs, so level 4 is less clean than level 5. 5, 7, 10 are like the clean, everything smooth levels, and 4, 6, and 9 are the less comfortable. You have to really work to get things to line up levels, and both have their benefits. I'm a 5, 7, 10 guy, but I like 4 and 6. Just never liked 9 very much. One thing this also does that's really important is it gives coverage of Deli's AA corner. Another thing to note is Deli doesn't have many ways to attack this, if really any, right? He doesn't have play in 6, and if you start looking at his play in 8, 2 of the cards have a 6 facing left, and not only does Turdz have that covered, but Turdz has that covered 2 different ways. So it's easy for him to expend one of those cards and still have it covered. And his other card is a 4 facing left. And Turdz also has that covered 2 different ways. So this is not only a starter that Turdz has a very easy time playing around, it is a starter that looks very difficult for Deli to approach. I notice if you play an 8 with a 6 facing left, both of Turdz's captures, combos, have a 6 facing up. But you don't have play against that. Just seeing the same number twice makes me think, oh, I should check if there's play against that. So that doesn't seem very promising. I would expect Deli, knowing Deli a bit, to play something in the opposite corner and force Turdz to put something else on the board, right? Like, Turdz has a clear plan of building out, but as soon as he builds out, he has to put something that will sort of create greater concession, right? If Turdz blocks 8, well, Turdz has no left power, and Deli could play something like A6, 3, 6, and 7, which, unless his move in 1 sets something up, is going to be safe. And going to also grab a card in 8, right? You have something to play against, you have something to get safety with. All right, we see that in 7 immediately. I'm going to spend a slightly larger amount of time. Wait, it's 5 minutes? Deli must have played much faster, and I just hadn't reloaded in a bit. Because I was thinking, how did we get down to Turdz is already down 2.5 minutes? Anyhow, and if Turdz goes in 6 instead of building out in 8, yeah, Deli can't attack 8 immediately, but at least he has potential attacks later. And maybe he can play in 3 safely with Doomtrain. Right? So that's what I would have expected from Deli, just with my sense of Deli. Deli goes for the adjacent corner, and he says a somewhat similar thing with it. He says, I have the double numbers for this, and note, this is a double number capture in 4 with Doomtrain that does not give me any concerns, right? There's no part of me that gets anxious about it because it has low numbers facing out that I know I'll be able to deal with, right? And it also makes the game leftward, both me thinking go in 1 and Deli thinking go in 7. Incidentally, I play more adjacent corners than Deli, and Deli plays more far corners than me, so it's at least somewhat amusing to me that Deli plays the adjacent corner as I was predicting the far corner. I didn't look at specific moves, though, so maybe all the actual specific moves didn't make sense, but my guess, I think, would have been 7, 6, 8, 6, and 1. Though it does give... yeah, there might just not be a card for it. Okay, this is a good standby though that people have of like, I have the double numbers in this direction, you don't. It's a 10. I can create a challenge here. I know Deli also now is a threat to go in 8. This is probably just better than whatever I was looking at, because 7 is blocked. Turdz is likely to block 8 himself, and the default move is with an A up, though a 9 up is also potentially worth considering. Though I think the default move is A7, 7, 1, and 8. And then the question is, can Deli set up an L? Now, he cannot set up an L unless I'm completely oblivious that has any threat, but that doesn't always mean there isn't an L that's playable here. And Turdz definitely does have a right word problem. So yeah, Turdz does play a 7-7-1 and 8, which is just, the normal and right thing to do. Serious left problem, but hard for Deli to attack, I think. Deli does not have to play 4. This is partially because Turdz doesn't have a threat in 4, but it's also because Deli doesn't really create something useful, obviously useful going in 4. And Deli has the widest range of things he considers doing in this position. So, like, we can ask some kind of strange questions here. Like, what if Deli goes 7-6-8-6 and 2, setting up a threat in 5? That's a very serious threat in 5, right? I'm going to assume they have to block that threat in 5. And the reason this came to mind was because I noticed they cannot block it with 6-6-4 and 5. It does look like they can block with either of the other 2 cards, and we're not in great shape. So this is not like a good idea. But it is the kind of idea that Deli is fairly likely to consider. This should also bring us to 7-6-8-6 and 3. Does this have any benefit? One thing I notice is if Turdz wants to block 6, the only way to do so that captures, if he wants to capture, is 9-4-A-3 and 6, and that sets up a same for Deli in 5. So he's probably not going to approach it that way. He probably would have to approach it by blocking 6 with 6-A-6-4 or 6-9-7-5. And maybe Deli has some ways to attack it, though Deli is really running out of right power there. I think all of this is kind of uncomfortable. And I haven't really spent the time to calculate 4. 4 is very dangerous feeling, right? If you play something like Doom Train in 4, and Turdz goes in, for instance, 1 with 6-A-6-4, you have to make sure that, 7-8-7-4 and 5 does tie. And maybe it does, right? Maybe something like 9-4-A-3 and 2, and you have 7-8-7, no, you don't. You have 7-6-8-6 and 3, and 6-9-7-5 blanks at the end. Or if 6-9-7-5 and 2, that doesn't capture 5, you can play 8-3-A-5 and 1, and 9-4-A-3 blanks at the end, right? Maybe you're just about holding those endgames, but it requires some calculation that I am not able to do in 40 seconds. So I'm just going to say, going in 4 is scary. My guess is some moves in 4 hold and some moves do not. And you probably should spend all your time here at least starting checking 4, and if you have extra time, you spend it on other squares, because, it is where your ties are most likely to be. I just wanted to pretend to be creative while watching a Deli game and think about options in, 2 or 3, because he has been known to go, okay, I called it, sort of. I said it, and then I dismissed it, but this was a move I mostly considered because it's Deli playing. But we also did briefly consider, and then dismissed. Turdz cannot block 5 with 6-A-6-4, and I think Turdz probably does have to block 5. I know I'm just repeating myself, but it's always worth restabilizing yourself when, you looked at a move and you moved on to other stuff, and then they play that move and you come back to it and you sort of reacquaint yourself with the basics of the move so that you're ready to think about it properly. So I would expect Turdz to block 5 with 6-9-7-5 or 9-4-A-3. Which of those cards is going to be more useful directionally later? One instinct is 9-4-A-3, of course, is the stronger card. It is much more up-down power. 6-9-7-5 does have the potential plus wall from 1, but not clear that plus wall will be very useful, right? If you're putting 9-4-A-3 and 5, which you need to do if you're holding on to 6-9-7-5, then comboing through 2 isn't going to combo anything extra. Right? If you put 6-9-7-5 and 5, you'd be happy to have 6-9-7-5 again for 1, but you have another card that can do that, 6-A-6-4, and you can't play the same card twice. So even though 6-9-7-5 has some play in 1, I think everything else it does is basically redundant, right? It doesn't control the 7s up. The 8 up is 6-A-6-4, also has the plus wall on. So I think just on a directional sense, 6-9-7-5 and 5 looks like looks like the move. It's 5/5. Um, if but yeah, so if you go there and Delhi plays 7/8, 7/4, and 4, and you take with 9/4, 8/3, that makes it they take, so they go up 6/4. Then it's 5/5. Your 6/9, 7/5 is gonna blank at the end after 8/3, 8/5, and 6. The only tie, but a tie nonetheless. So if 6/9, 7/5, and 5, if they go 4, you could also play 6/8, 6/4, and 1 and go up 6/4, but then there's always like Doom Train in 3, and it's 5/5, and 9/4, 8/3 doesn't cover. So I don't think 6/9, 7/5, and 5 wins. And it seems less likely that 9/4, 8/3 would. So I was probably wrong to dismiss this move. One idea that's worth considering, it's bad, but it's something like, I mean, it's just obviously bad, but something like 9/4, 8/3, and 1, where you say, yes, you have this big threat in 5, but I have created a counter threat in 4. The problem is it's not a very good counter threat in 4 because Delhi plays 7/8, 7/4, and 4, taking that up, and you don't have anything useful to do in 5. Um, Now you could. No, that doesn't work. Yeah, I think this does hold, or at least I don't see the punish. And if you don't see the punish, you should assume it holds. Turdz does go 6/9, 7/5, and 5, which I do think was the most rational retort. But I think Delhi has found his way to a tie. Very nice and creative from Delhi. Again, like it's interesting, right? Because when I think, what creative move would Delhi do here? I do come up with the move, but I also dismiss it very quickly, right? I go, this looks really uncomfortable. But Delhi either has better heuristics for when this move could be good, a better understanding of like, okay, it gives up this, T's are kind of unpleasant, but I have these factors in my favor, and I think that should be enough. Or he's calculated it out. He's gone, like, the reason, and I've talked about moves like this. I just tend not to feel like 2 is a move like this. But often there can be a kind of appealing vague move or a really forcing move. And if you're in danger, checking the really forcing move is really useful because if it does happen to lead to endgames that are ties, you can just force that endgame, right? Delhi sees, okay, I go in 4, there's a lot of stuff Turdz could do, it's vague and difficult. If I go in 2, Turdz has to go 5. Like, he doesn't have a setup for 4, he really has to block 5, that's too big a threat. And if I can find anything at all there that holds, I've just held, right? I can force that position, even though it looks unpleasant and ugly at a distance. So I think this is nicely handled by Delhi. I really like how he played this game with a very uncomfortable starter to meet, and I think a difficult hand to play. Now that's not to say Turdz did anything wrong. Like unless there was a win here on turn 5, I suspect Turdz just played this game absolutely perfectly. He's just on the side of it where, like, when he plays perfectly, it doesn't look impressive, right? He's not the one being forced to find creative moves. I do think this is true for a lot of analysis. Like, someone just plays, like, gets advantages and plays strongly. You go, well, they did nothing special. But in fact, like, usually they were outplaying their opponent in the early game and then had a position they could play straightforwardly, and they did so in excellent fashion. And it's just a really well played game. And it may not look impressive, but it is really good. But the impressive looking games are when someone has restricted or limited or weak resources and finds a way to piece them together. And I think Delhi managed a nice job here, and Turdz just played. And again, this may sound insulting, but it isn't at all. It is how I personally try to play, just conventionally strongly, right? Doesn't have to do anything outside the lines. Can just and shouldn't, right? Has a good position where you can play forceful, difficult moves and make your opponent solve tricky problems. Just we're always going to congratulate the person that solves the tricky problems more. So I'm expecting 7/8, 7/4, and 4. I haven't really checked anything, and if that turns out not to be a tie, I'll feel kind of foolish. But just to reiterate, if 7/8, 7/4, and 4, That's 6-4. If 9-4, A3, and 1, that makes it 5-5, but you can go A3, A5, and 6, and 6A, 6-4 is dead. So it's a tie. If they go 6A, 6-4, and 1, that flips 2 cards, 2 and 5, you're down 6-4. But Doom Train in 3 flips 2, and 9-4, A3 is dead at the end, so that's a 5-5. If you go in 6 and 4 and Turdz goes in 6, he didn't capture anything, he can't set up anything. You go 1, Turdz is dead in 3, you win. And if you go in 4 and Turdz goes in 1, you can go in 2 and you win. So the reason Deli hasn't played in 4 already is because he is checking if there's more here. He may have also landed on a different tie than I did, but there's a very good chance he is checking for more. I am not checking for more, but you can see he has switched up the move order and set up a potential combo chain, right? Because he noticed something I did not notice. He noticed 7-8-7-4 as a combo in 1. So, if Turdz were to play 6A, 6-4, and 6, and Deli has set up a threat in 6, so it's hard not to play 6 yourself. Wait a second, though. So I was thinking Turdz should play 9-4, A3, and 6 instead. If he plays 6A, 6-4, and 6, that flips 3, which combos through to 2, so when Deli combos back from 1, that's going to flip 2, which is going to flip 5, which is going to flip 6 back, and suddenly Deli wins. Turdz can play 9-4, A3, and 6, and the point is, if Deli plays 4, Turdz now combos from 1 through 2 to flip 5 back and wins, but Deli can just block 1 there. Yeah, this was a nice idea from Deli. This is presuming I'm not a moron and my move did in fact tie, this is a trickier tie, and you can see why Deli rightfully expended the time on it. But 9-4, A3 in 6 is the tie I expect to see. Turdz is, of course, checking things. Is there anything somewhere else, right? And actually, one thing worth checking is 9-4, A3 in 4. Because then 6A, 6-4 has a combo in 6, which would win if allowed, and a combo in 1. The problem is, if you go 9-4, A3, and 4, Deli does not flip 5. He can't, in fact. He's going to play 7-8, 7-4, and 6, flipping only 9, going up 6-4, and 6A, 6-4 plus walls the card in 2, but that doesn't flip anything extra because 5 never flipped. But Turdz has got to check all these things, right? This is a surprisingly tricky position with 3 moves left, and you can see why Deli used his time finding the most complex and combative move here. Nice game. I'm gonna go put it in my notes for a moment. So, luckily for you, my commentary will potentially briefly desist, unless I just keep babbling endlessly. But a nice game. All right. I expect we will see 9-4, A3, and 6, or 4. Or 1. I did not consider 1. Okay, that creates a threat in 4. We did see this idea in another line. So if Deli plays 6, capturing 9, you play 4, capturing 1 in response. And if Deli plays in 4, you play in 6, and because you combo 3, that flips 2, which will flip back 1 and 5 as needed. So Deli must block 6, and he must take the card in 9, so we will be seeing, I will put in my database, 7-8-7-4 in 6. We'll do that by 6A, 6-4 in 4. And we will have ourselves a tie game. Yep. Alright. So I'm going to pause the video until, I can do a whole new video for the next game. So Deli still leads the match 1-0, having won game 3 of the match, a closed game. and presumably they will continue shortly into game number 5. Interesting game. I like this one. Nice and creative. Moves I had dismissed, but had power nonetheless, and I was deeply mistaken.